Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Bronco Health Talk, where we converse and discuss all things within health sciences in our college, and especially some of the great things that our faculty are doing here, as well as at times our students. But today we're excited to have Blake Densley, the director of the Human Performance Lab, as well as faculty instructor within kinesiology. I'm Derek Hebert, marketing manager for health sciences. With me here is Sam Butler, our student media team employee. He helps to produce the podcast and as well as co-host it with me. And we have Danya Lusk, our senior communication specialist with health sciences, as well as Grant Olson here, another one of our student media team members here that are going to help with production. We're just excited to have Blake on the show today. And Blake, we're just going to be talking about things with the Human Performance Lab and what's involved in that. So, thanks again for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's just start out talking about the purpose of the Human Performance Lab, or we'll refer to it as the HPL. What would you say are the most common reasons why someone would go to the HPL?
Sure. So the Human Performance Lab here at Boise State is a premier facility dedicated to teaching, research, and service in the field of human performance. Our lab serves everyone, so faculty, staff, students primarily as kind of the central point from a teaching perspective, and then the broader community providing cutting-edge assessments in education and exercise physiology, exercise science, health, performance optimization, you name it. I think your question, though, is why would someone come to the HPL? Well, we currently are running between 10 and 12 student-oriented labs every week, so part of it's an obligation as a student in kinesiology to be present in those spaces and learning. But beyond that, it's really an engaging with our community, whether that's the Boise State community specific, whether it's in searching for the answers to research questions within the lab, or helping people in optimizing or just understanding better their health and performance. So we work with grandmas, grandpas, moms, dads, elite level athletes, and anyone in between. And I think that's part of what makes the job of being in and around the lab an exciting place.
That's great. So, basically what you're saying is the HPL is not just for Boise State students, staff, and faculty. It's really for the entire community.
Yep.
Which is great.
Exactly. Yeah, we serve everyone, and I think that's one of the most kind of gratifying components of what we do, especially as an educational institution, where we're not only directly engaged in working with our colleagues from a research lens or with our students from an educational environment position, but really trying to integrate all of those individuals into kind of this community setting too.
Can you tell us your role in kinesiology here at Boise State as a whole, kind of?
Sure. Well? Yeah. So primarily, my main role is in a faculty role. So I'm a clinical associate professor of exercise science. And this is kind of the bucket list item, as well as tapping on top of that, being able to direct the lab. And so ultimately, as an exercise scientist and as an exercise physiologist specifically, I am interested in helping others in better understanding how can we engage people in their health and in performance, their fitness, their physical activity, whatever that might look like for them. And trying to understand better the systems that we can put in place to allow for people to do that more. And so the lab serves as just one of those systems where people can engage.
That's great. You talked about all the different kinds of people, both within Boise State as well as the community that can benefit from the HPL. What are some of the things that let's say a non-athlete or a non-competitive athlete person do at the HPL, or what kinds of
what
ways?
kind of tests?
Right.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I'll frame it as some little story arcs, right? I think for one of the best parts about being in this role is to help others in understanding kind of myth versus fact within the area of health, performance, exercise, physical activity, and part of that is, in this role right now and taking part in a podcast, right? There are many, many, many podcasts out there that are engaging in the world of what should we know, or what do we know, or what do we think we know, or what can we promote within the lens of exercise and physical activity, performance, and health. And so to us, one of our missions kind of that's housed within kind of this education framework is in helping others in understanding better what are these actual tests and what do they mean, and how can we do more? So more to help them understand. So kind of scenario one, right? So maybe you're a perimenopausal woman who is stressed about the kind of the future perspective of their risk of osteopenia or osteoporosis. Most healthcare systems in our community and beyond, you cannot actually qualify for a DEXA scan until you've actually started to show specific risk factors or criteria to get approval to actually do something like that. And DEXA is the gold standard currently for assessment of general bone mineral composition and body composition. And so we see many women that specifically fall within that category on a daily basis who are interested in better understanding where they stand within this type of a metric and health outcome. And so they'll come and see us, and for a very nominal fee, they're able to get that information. Many of them have actually been referred to us by their primary care providers because they can't specifically refer them in for a DEXA within their own hospital systems. And so we provide that test for them, and then they can go back and talk with their primary care providers. But we also sit down with them and talk about what these results mean within the context of, we're not diagnosing anything, but we certainly can provide interpretations of what we're able to find from those tests. So that's kind of number one, right? Second one, we'll stay kind of in the aging environment. It's kind of a theme, at least for some of the thoughts that I've had for this podcast, but I think it's relevant just in terms of the majority of people that we see. You've got a grandpa who wants to be able to essentially out-thrive the moment of their grandkids going through college and beyond, right? And want to see them get married, and they want to see them having kids and become a great grandparent, right? And within this overall space, in the zeitgeist has become the information around of our cardiovascular fitness is, and specifically a measure known as the VO2 max, or volume of oxygen consumed maximum. So what we kind of call our vital capacity in exercise physiology, is the single most important predictor from a fitness perspective in predicting the longevity of life from a vitality standpoint. And this has been something that we've known for a long time as exercise physiologists, but it's just kind of entered into common practice of when we're discussing our health or our fitness and anything else. And so that grandpa wants to come in. They listened to a podcast, they read a book, they saw something like that, right? And we welcome them, right? And we say, okay, let's do this. Let's actually see where this is for you, and is there additional room for you for achievement and kind of understanding that better. And so, it's very much not an athlete coming in and doing that same test, which would have a very specific purpose to it, right? We want to know what the engine is in that case if they're coming in for a VO2 max test, and just how much kind of total capacity do you have to work with. And so that's, from an athletic side, maybe they're doing that type of test, and they're kind of getting into the specific performance aspects of things because they've run a couple half marathons at this point, and they're really trying to see what more that they can do. So it really runs the full gamut. If you're really interested in your body composition, for example, you've been an avid gym goer for a few years, and you want to know how much lean mass or muscle mass you've actually been able to acquire or gain over a certain time period, you might come in and do pre or post or just continued testing to understand the changes that you made from your programming. So we work with everyone.
I had an interesting question from when I was giving a tour for HOSA, actually. One of the teachers was asking, hey, can our students use this as a fundraising opportunity and kind of conduct these tests? It's like you're trained to do these tests and be the operator. Right. I can't just go replace you, basically. Do you want to kind of speak on some of what that looks like?
No, it's a really a good question. I think also speaks to kind of the qualifications of individuals who are offering a variety of tests, and who should you be seeking for this type of information. And I think that you're hitting it kind of spot on. Generally, if I've trained a technician that doesn't have their own credentials, they're essentially operating under my credentials and my own training of them in operating in that particular space. If they have their own credentials, right, studied for and passed the exercise physiology exam. They've gone on and gotten their certified strength and conditioning specialist, something that's kind of a higher level, or a master's degree in exercise physiology, something like that, where there's just advanced level skill that's being placed. It allows for them to have a bit more autonomy in the tests. But we have, over the years, and I've only been in this position for a couple of years, but even still, we've very specifically sought interns, undergraduate and graduate level interns, that we can train and allow for them to have the experience of running those tests. It shouldn't be just anyone running and operating the tests, but we feel a lot more confident, say, if we've got undergraduate students in our kinesiology program that have come through both our exercise physiology and exercise testing prescription labs, right? Like, we could pretty easily scaffold them into an environment where they could be operating and running some of these tests on their own, or at least with some level of supervision in the moment. The fundraising question is an interesting one, right? I think that's one of the pieces that allows for us to do what we're doing, and being able to have the technicians, the interns, our lab coordinator, purchase of new equipment, exploring research questions. These are all actually fundable through what we're able to do in providing these testing services to our community. So I think it's a super interesting question, and I would certainly hear them out, right? It's like, oh, could we do this kind of thing for fundraising? It's like, well, come into the lab. Let's explore and play with this. Let's see what this actually looks like in terms of trying to build something. Because that's, again, we're not out here to make money. We're out here to provide an influential educational impact in our community, while also sustaining ourselves within the lab.
It's good. So there's a lot of great testing that the lab does, right, with the DEXA or the VO2. Are there any performance tests or other kinds of tests out there that the HPL is not equipped to do?
It's a good question. We're not a biomechanics lab, and so I would say that's certainly an area where we don't have an excessive amount of opportunity within, but we do have, we have a biomechanics lab on campus, and so those questions can still be answered. Those types of tests may still be able to be explored, but I think one of the pieces of this is like, well, what can't we do? What are we not able to do? And I would say if the question fits within the mission of the lab, we have an obligation to explore it. And so we've been pretty actively looking into some of those capacity-based things, like, well, should we get some force plates in the lab? Not only does this allow for us to do some additional experiments and exposure pieces with our students, from like an applied sports science and physiology environment, but it allows for us to have another assessment tool that we can be utilizing within the lab. So yeah, I think right now that's really kind of the space in terms of being an exercise physiology lab. All of the kind of classic equipment that you would expect in that space we have. We're pretty well supplied in that, and again, we're pretty constantly looking into what else could we be doing, what could we be securing, what could we be training on, so that we can do more and be better. So
if you're ready, Derek, do you want to kind of move away from the lab itself and talk about some of the biggest threats to physical performance and movement that you see, mainly just in everyday life?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. When I saw this question, when I was thinking about it, I have a more elaborate response attached to it, but like, it's just one word, and it's inactivity, period. And in my notes, it's written inactivity, period. So I kind of have an analogy. So go with me here. Okay? You're standing in a room. You're just by yourself. It's got a really tall ceiling in this room, but you walk into this room and it has this tall ceiling to it. That is your genetic ceiling for you choose whatever characteristic it might be, right? It's your VO2 max. It's your total muscular force output. What's the maximum X value to some aspect of your health, fitness, performance, you name it. And a good proportion of the total percentage of your performance in that area is predetermined essentially by your genetics. But whether or not you ever get close to that ceiling is dictated by what you do. It's not just this inherent gift. There are some of those components, but it requires, in large part, if we're using movement as kind of this aspect of things, requires it. So how do you get to that ceiling, right? Some of the steps in the room, right? It's a large room, but some of the steps in the room are pre-built, right? That's that genetic component. And as you go and as you move, you may be starting to go up those steps toward the ceiling, right? You're getting closer. And maybe as you continue to train, as you continue to move, as you continue to apply yourself within a physical environment, you get a little closer and start even building some railings, some additional steps, right? You're getting closer and closer and closer to that ceiling. But this doesn't remain built, right? You might have additional options, other steps, right? Other portions to the ceiling. Now the analogy gets bigger, but you stop moving for a period of time, whether it's an injury, whether, you had a life event. I've got 2 young kids, 3 years and younger, right? We struggle with these moments on a weekly basis on like, do I have time to move? And sometimes it's just walking from building to building on campus. But if we stop, those steps start to degrade. The railings start to come off, right? The metaphorical and literal ones. And they don't necessarily go away altogether. But some of them will if you remain inactive too long. Now, some of those are forced by age. The aging process in general is going to be kind of lowering your capacity to reach that ceiling just inherently. But inactivity does it even faster. And if we continue to remain in that space, not only do we start breaking down those components that got us closer, but even when we restart, we jump back on the wagon, right? We're re-engaging. We're getting super interested in the space again. We can climb up some steps, but some of them are gone forever. And so the kind of intention of the analogy is we have now, right? We have these moments, and I'm not saying like we have to just go and push to the ceiling right now. But if we're not making active attempts continually, with some breaks in there because it's natural, but if we're not continuing to engage in it, it's gone. And you may be able to get to some level of that capacity and reach a little closer to that ceiling. But what could have beens are like the literal physiological what could have beens. And so this is certainly a piece that I try to teach my students, especially when they're really interested in a certain aspect of their fitness, right? Right now, everyone really seems to be keyed in on resistance training, right? They're in the gym, and I love seeing it, right? I think it's great. But when you start talking to them about cardiovascular fitness, they're like, I don't need this right now. Like, it's just not necessary. I do my walks, right? I do this kind of thing, but I just want to spend my time in the gym. And again, I think it's awesome, right? They're doing something, and that's wonderful. But when we ignore a characteristic, it's still built into an inactivity paradigm, right? You're losing out on the potential of what it actually could be if you're not actually engaging in it now. So for that, again, that older dad or mom or figure that really wants to be considering that longevity piece and things, it's like it's not something that you get to just start in your 40s and 50s and 60s and see. You can see gains and improvements, but if you had this large period where you weren't doing it, it is impacting kind of the actual potential for what it could be moving forward. So long story short, like, doing something now is much better than remaining in an inactive state.
Yeah. I think that analogy with the ceiling and the genetics and all that you're talking about, if I'm understanding correctly, is really fascinating. It seems like you can get old by age, but if you're staying active and moving, you're still making progress towards that ceiling in a sense. Whereas as you're getting older in age, if you're not intentionally moving and pursuing that activity, it's like you're stunting your growth towards that ceiling, right? In a sense. So some of the fitness that I'm involved in, I've heard of this principle where we'll say if you don't stop moving when you get old when you stop moving.
I just used that exact quote in a conference presentation to a group of medical providers in the community. And that one's actually centered around resistance training and aging and the importance of doing so. So, it's a great words to live by when we're just considering our role within a physically active environment.
Right. It's important stuff. And man, I feel like this principle of, you know, the threat of inactivity and to physical performance and movement is so huge. We could probably talk a long time about all the implications of that.
Can you tell?
What
I
does that
already like
actually
to talk a
look
lot,
like?
so it works. It works pretty well within my field.
Right. We were thinking a little bit about these wearable fitness and activity trackers and all the technology out there that really, I think, helps to motivate us and to keep us active, right? Which is a good thing. How would you say these compare to the actual tests that the HPL might provide? Is it worth getting data from like a tracker, a watch, or, you know, some kind of wearable tracker versus coming into the HPL? What are the differences there?
Yeah, it's an awesome question, and one that I actually receive regularly with my students. They're often coming around and say, Dr. Densley, my VO2 max on my Garmin watch says that I'm at a 52. Like, cool. How about let's use some units? And I tease them a little bit. Like, well, my watch only says 52. And I'm like, but you know the units. We just did this lab. Like, actually, you just did this lab and you tested your VO2 max in the lab. What did it look like? And they're like, well, they're drastically different. Oh, interesting. Surprised? Not really. And so I think wearables are awesome. Okay, so wearables and lab testing are both useful, but they do different jobs. And I think you've already brought up one of them in terms of like this motivational aspect of things. And I think that has a really good place for it. But there's some other kind of data components to this as well that can be helpful. Your watch is, like, for analogy purposes, your watch, I would say, is more like a daily dashboard, right? It informs you on where things are relative to the data that it's collecting, and it can give you some values that you can be tracking. Whereas the Human Performance Lab, this is like a wind tunnel, right? If you've ever thought about like athletes in the Tour de France, right? They're like, what are they doing in the off seasons to dial in what's going on with their cycling performance? They're going into the lab and they're literally going into these wind tunnels to understand their aerodynamics, their positions, what's going on with new equipment, all of these things. And though we're not an actual wind tunnel, that would be cool. It's I think the analogy works from this perspective. So most modern watches, they're pretty good at tracking things that relate to maybe some accelerometry data, certainly pedometer type data where it's, you know, tracking steps, general movements, rates of movement, that type of thing. And definitely is pretty dang good at measuring heart rate now, right? So heart rate or at least pulse rate, and then giving you a heart rate from a wearable watch is really very good. And that information can give you some good estimates. So it can predict a decent VO2 max in terms of like giving you an estimate of what something's going on from a cardiovascular fitness standpoint. My watch, for example, I'm wearing one. I'll go on a run and it updates my lactate threshold. It's like, interesting. You're not stabbing me and taking my blood while I'm running. So how are you giving me this lactate threshold? So again, it's utilizing kind of this accelerometry plus heart rate data to give you this prediction. And again, I would say for what it provides, it's really good at providing you trends, right? It's really good at being able to help you understand, you know, oh, your heart rate variability overnight gave you this score. And consistently over time, if you continue to wear that watch over and over and over again, it's updating and it's showing you previous night activity relative to now and a 2-week average, so on and so forth. And it's giving you this value, right? And it can be reliable in terms of understanding what's going on here. But what the lab does, it actually gives you the data, right? So if you want to know VO2 max, I might be predicting it on my watch. When you come into the lab, it could be 15% different. Or even more, depending on, you know, when did your watch establish what that VO2 max was and how often does it update? And so you might come into the Human Performance Lab and we run that same test and it's drastically different. And the difference is that in the lab, we're running gold standard measured tests. We're using metabolic carts that are tested off of a referent. We're using, a brand new DEXA in the lab to be able to understand bone mineral density and body composition. And we can run lactate thresholds where we're actually measuring blood-based lactate while someone's performing. And so it takes away that predictive component and starts getting into a much more valid, reliable, objective measure. So when you want to know what it is with a much tighter margin of error built into the test, then you come into the lab for a gold standard measure. when you're wanting to, pair that with your wearable, do it. I think the best combo thing in my eyes is like the sweet spot is you use the lab to calibrate your physiology and your zones and your training, and then you let the wearable actually then help you in kind of seeing where that's sitting, right? It's informing you based on, well, we came in and we did this lab testing. Now let's let this technology help us in kind of maintaining what was established by going into lab and seeing what it actually looks like.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you currently wear one of those wearables?
All the time. I took it off because I needed to charge overnight, and miraculously I slept very well last night. Our 7-month-old decided to sleep, so so I didn't get to see just how great of a night's sleep that I may have had. But yes, I think that motivation side of things, that connectiveness to kind of understanding or maintaining progress, tracking, understanding whether or not maybe you're slipping, right? But we all, if you're even tapped in any way into the social environment of what pops up around wearables, right? There's always a debate of like, oh, some wearables are really pleasant to wear, where they're like, good job, you did your thing, keep going. You closed your step goal for the day, like celebrate the thing. And others, which I'm wearing one of them, is like, man, not a great day for you, was it? It's like, oh, a little bit more like, it just seems like a negative tone. Like I'm never progressing. I'm always just in this apparent state of stress. It's like, hey man, maybe you need to take your foot off the gas. It's like, I haven't even exercised today. That's interesting. So it
feels condescending. Like the wearable's disappointed in you.
It really can be, which is, proceed with caution when you're choosing which wearables you're selecting. And truthfully, several of these wearable technologies are also very well tapped into like the research scientific community as well. So there is some level of choice involved and not just being influenced by whatever the newest technology it might be. Typically, if I'm having that conversation with someone, I'm going to be backing it off of what's actually been measured and tested on, and how well is it actually trying to get to predicting this actual thing, and what's the margin of error, and not just behind this curtain of all of these algorithms that are coming from the company that you have no understanding of.
Kind of what I was going to say is also like, some of them say great job, but then also sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh, my body battery is like
yes, the body
20,
battery.
But I feel great.
And like, what
and
is
I'm
this
about to
body
go work
battery?
out, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're like, well, should I be doing this? Should I, like, what's the performance negative right now?
Sure.
When it's really just an algorithm that
you guys are asking great questions. This is another moment that I actually just spoke at another conference about to a group of athletic trainers, and trying to help them understand kind of wearable based technology and how it could actually potentially inform readiness and recovery in their athletes. And so the topics was on a measure known as heart rate variability, and how could you use it? Well, your watch can measure heart rate variability, right? It's one of those things that kind of gets baked into this idea of like the body battery. And it's meant to help us in recognizing a little bit of this like recovery and readiness to perform. And so if your value is slipping or declining below what's like your established baseline, then in theory, like you're not recovered yet. You need to give yourself some time. Heart rate variability has been very well studied. And most of our wearables, again, for consistency purposes, gives you a value that you can kind of rely on, but there's a ton of noise usually that's built into it. And that's where it's like, oh, actually, if we use a different type of wearable, we'd get a lot better data. And that would actually be coming in that case from a chest-worn heart rate strap, where it's actually measuring electrical activity of the heart and can get you a much better assessment of that particular variable. But most of us are not going to sleep with a heart rate monitor strapped to ourselves. We might sleep with our watch, and so it gives us a thing. So again, heart rate variability pretty well understood from a research scientific environment. Plenty of research questions out there still on like, well, we don't know what's going on in X, right? But like from an information perspective, it's like, yeah, no, this can actually help us in understanding whether or not we might need to pull back in today's workout. Body battery, no idea.
Yeah.
Right? What is this thing? How is it being defined? Why is my sleep score saying I did absolutely beautifully, and how is this being based? And this is where some of that proprietary algorithmic information coming from a wearable technology company, it might be in a slight amount of dissonance with the exercise physiology or the performance side of things. So usually I recommend, like, what are the things that we can be tracking, right? Like, well, resting heart rate. It's a pretty good indicator of whether or not you might be recovered and ready to go. Combine that with some heart rate variability, and now we're getting a little closer. How well did you sleep, whether it's from a sleep score compoment on your
Or just
watch,
how you
right?
feel.
Or just like, really, how do you feel when you
Yeah.
woke up? Did you get interrupted a bunch in the night? Were you tossing and turning? Or do you feel all right? Or maybe you're still feeling kind of groggy in the morning, but like, man, I did sleep pretty well, and these other things are starting to show me that maybe I'm actually ready for this. And if you've got a hard workout planned for that day, it's like, go, right? But if you start seeing, oh, my resting heart rate is up 8 beats per minute from 3 days ago, where my average was much lower, my heart rate variability is dropping, and I slept like crap, like, oh, all right. Maybe today actually isn't the time for that hard workout. Maybe it is. Like, I'm going to pull back. I'm still going to move. But now I'm not going to be doing that. But right, we just stare at the thing on the watch, right? And it says your body battery's low or high or whatever it might be. And it's just like, oh, well, I just shouldn't be doing this, right? And no, it's a much more complicated answer.
Yeah.
But bottom line, move, right?
interesting.
Don't let your watch just tell you
Right.
what's going on. So connect to another human, I guess, in that case, and understanding it.
So not to sound trite, but it seems like this body battery thing feels more of like this metaphorical concept that we don't really know maybe what it means, and we should really just dig into the hard data that we actually have in these categories.
Yeah, and or as this continues to develop, then we will understand it better as far as like what's the intent of that particular metric and where might it fit. The challenge is that our day-to-days, when we're moving around, it's just not necessarily a good indicator as to whether or not our body batteries are high or low, right? Like, we have plenty of stress. And so apparently from a body battery standpoint, if I have a lot of kind of psychological based stress in the moment, it's just draining that battery. But that doesn't actually mean that I can't go out and perform again, right? It's possible, right? And it could be really draining from a performative standpoint, but it also could be, right, we can recharge, we can refocus and still go and do that thing. So yeah, it's kind of, you're ignoring these other things, I suppose, right? The kind of glamorous moments of what these wearables can provide, and focus again, like you're saying, on what do we know, and how can we rely on those to still give us a sense of, well, should I be doing this? Should I be going full gas today or not?
Well, thanks, Blake, so much for joining us. This is a really fascinating conversation. A lot of great insights and things that are really good to be aware of and to know and to continue to, I guess, grow and learn in our own understanding of our bodies and performance and movement. And I think just that big takeaway is don't stay inactive for too long.
It's okay. Give yourself a chance to recover, or you're going through whatever you're going through, but like, come back. Please come back. Yeah.
That's good stuff. Well, thanks again for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening to another episode of Bronco Health Talk.